The hour of 3 o'clock having arrived, we will come out of recess and we'll call the meeting back to order. And members, we have the bill here before us, so what I will do, I'd like to get the bill in the shape we would like here, so I will move the, well, we've already moved the H4385DE1 amendment, so we have that before us. Members, I'll move the H4385A12 amendment. What that does is that adjusts the rates. Any discussion on that? That's an author's amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. We will now, just to get the bill in the shape we need so we can start with the other amendments. We have the Chair Drazkowski was the A18-0834 amendment. A18-0834. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. We now have the bill in the order that I would like before the committee. And so now we will go right into amendments, members. You should have a whole packet of amendments. What members have amendments that are not in the packet? Okay, Representative Schultz, Representative Deppner, are both yours in?
It should be.
There's one.
No, you have two that are not in the packet. How many? Two that are not in the packet.
Metz's are yours.
Why don't we do
Am I in the packet?
do these last?
I've got one not in the packet.
Okay, so
Okay.
You're the senior member, Chair Carlson. Do you want to have yours passed out?
We do.
Could you check with our lead? I think he had a
Well,
suggestion.
we'll go with your order. We'll go with your order, Chair Marquardt. What's first?
Mr. Chair, first would be an A11 amendment that's being passed out right now.
So can we have it so that we don't do any of these until the end? Or?
Correct.
Okay.
We can wait and, right, that is not one of
That's
those.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, members, we're going to do a little bit of a redo. I had Chair Drazkowski move his amendment, and he wasn't here, so I'll move the Drazkowski amendment.
Okay.
Just details, I know. So I will rescind it. We have to rescind it. All in favor of rescinding the A18-0834 amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. We now have the A18-0834 amendment before us. I will move it. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you, members. So now we're where we need to be at this point. So this is the H4385A22 amendment. It looks to me like this is a Bloomington tax increment financing going to a 5-year rule. So instead of 15 years on 1.9, we go from 15 to 20. I should probably have the author explain it. Who's the author of this one? Chair Marquardt.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the A22 amendment, and this was a bill carried by Representative Carlson and heard in the Property Tax Division. And then when we were marking up the bill, Representative Carlson talked to it, and at that point they said it wasn't quite ready, so there's a little bit more work. But basically what it is, it's involves the Bloomington Central Station. It's a 50-acre site. That was tax increment financing was set up in 2005, and it will expire in 2020. It was kind of an expansion of the 5-year rule. It went 15 years to 2020. What this bill would do is expand it 5 more years from 15 to 20. And the reason for that, right now about $300 million worth of redevelopment has occurred. They're expecting another $600 million of redevelopment to occur, and with a lot of these multi-purpose, that 5-year rule just doesn't work. And this has kind of been the language that's been agreed upon by all parties involved. And so, members, I would appreciate support. And it's 8 other times. We have 8 other ones where it's been the 5-year rule has been completely done away with. We're keeping a 5-year extension off from 15 to 20 years. Now, does it not impact how long the tax increment financing district will last? That will expire in 2039. So it doesn't affect that date at all. It just gives a little more time before they'd have to come back in to deal with some of these developments that are occurring in that area.
Thank you. Representative Metza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm supportive of the idea of the amendment, making sure the community has the opportunity to do this. And I was just wondering if Mr. Michael knows of any precedent. This is my first term on the tax committee, and have we done any other projects where we waived the timeline so that investments could be made in the communities?
Mr. Michael.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Metza, many.
Okay, Representative Metza.
That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, maybe people picked up on it, but, you know, there's 3 Carlsons in the legislature, and my good friend kept saying Representative Carlson.
Nice
So-
job, Representative Carlson.
Yeah, I'm the Carlson from Crystal. This is the Carlson from Bloomington, as the amendment reads.
The other side
Andrew.
of the family.
Yeah.
But at one time, there were 5 Carlsons in the legislature. Talk about confusion, including Arnie, who was very, very good at being in the newspaper, and sometimes there was confusion. But at any rate, it's
No
Andrew
comment.
Carlson that was working.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Chair Marquardt moves the H438582 amendment. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Item
Thank you, Mr.
next.
Chair.
Chair Marquardt, you're on a roll.
Thank you very much. I think we have House Representative Schultz, I think, has, Mr. Chair, an amendment.
Okay, well.
That's outside the packet. Is it being passed around
Yes.
right now? Okay.
Thank you. Representative Schultz moves the 18-5010 amendment is what we're going to call it. While they're being passed out, we won't vote till every member has it. But Representative Schultz, why don't you explain what you're
Sure.
doing here?
So this amendment is the local option sales tax for Duluth. This bill was heard in Chair Drazkowski's Property Tax Committee, and this was approved by Duluth voters last year. Over 75% of them support increasing the sales tax by half a cent. That revenue would go to road improvement in Duluth. And so I hope we can support this. I'm sure you forgot to put it in your tax bill. It was just a mistake. I'm sure your daughter wants good roads in Duluth, Chair Davids.
He does. Chair Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the amendment, Representative Schultz. We did discuss this in committee, and I know, talked to many members on the committee. A number of us are concerned about the high level of taxation in Duluth, too. There's a full 1% sales tax already in existence in Duluth, a local option sales tax, the only community in the state that has it, and it goes directly to the general fund for the city of Duluth. So this would add yet another half cent on top of that, and it's really, I think, kind of compelling to see those realities and at the same time realize their roads are in tough shape. And I wonder where all the money's going in Duluth and what's happening. If I was a taxpayer in Duluth, I know I'd be very frustrated. But that being said, I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if Representative Schultz would be in favor of a compromise that would adopt this, coupled with some local preemption for some of the union activity that we're seeing. We could help save the city of Duluth a considerable amount of money in the future if we had something like that. But this preemption language, I think, for the city of Duluth would fit nicely with this. I'm wondering if the author would be interested in that, Mr. Chair.
Representative Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are you offering an amendment to this amendment, a trade-off that you would allow us to increase our half-cent sales tax if we support local preemption? Is that correct?
Chair Drazkowski?
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative Schultz, that's the idea. I don't have the language ready. We could certainly set it aside and bring it back later, if you like. That we could lay it over and bring it back at the end of the meeting. That would give me time to get the language ready, but that's certainly the idea.
Representative Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that the people that voted overwhelmingly in support of increasing the sales tax so they could have better roads would most likely be opposed to that amendment of Chair Drazkowski's, because they also like local control. So I wouldn't be amenable to that. I don't think the people in Duluth would be amenable to that. You can try it. You're in the majority during session, but I can't make that trade-off here. So if there's no support on your side for this amendment, I will withdraw it.
Well, I guess we don't know that. Chair Drazkowski, or do you see any support on our
Well,
side?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know. I haven't polled people here, Mr. Chair. I just know that
Representative
there's...
Schultz, would you like to withdraw this, or at this point, or continue?
Yeah. Whatever you want.
It's up to you.
Well, Mr. Chair, do you support this amendment?
No,
Then I will withdraw it.
Okay, item next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I would like to clarify that just a bit. Members, and while the next, well, who's next? Chair Mark.
Representative Loeffler has a A7 amendment.
Okay, let's get that passed out, and then we'll go to Representative Loeffler. But you'll notice in the bill itself, there's a very important project that is not included in this tax bill. It's the Essentia Duluth project that I'm carrying, that I am going to continue to work very, very hard on. It's not in this bill because I don't have the money for it at this point. There's going to be some leadership decisions needed before we can actually proceed with that bill, which I'm going to make every effort to do. But I can see where something such as the amendment that was just withdrawn could possibly play into that discussion, that debate. We don't know these things, but we will continue to work on it because I think that's a very, very important project for the Northeast, and I'm committed to it. I just have to find some money. Okay, with that being said, Representative Loeffler moves the H4385A7 amendment. Representative Loeffler, two-year amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I've had a chance to talk to many of you, not quite all. The discussion yesterday on the floor didn't go quite long enough. But this is kind of a complicated situation that only applies in the city of Minneapolis. In 1986, when our local lodging tax, and every city has an opportunity to have up to 3% in a local lodging tax, was imposed to pay for the costs of our convention center. For some reason, we haven't found anyone who can remember 1986 why this was put in. An overall cap connected to all sales taxes was put into law. And Minneapolis has a lodging tax that is actually less than most of its larger competitors, St. Paul and Bloomington and Duluth, and so we're kind of in the middle of the pack. What the situation we ran into was because this adjusts to all sales taxes, not the state legacy tax, and other taxes. When Hennepin County increased took advantage of the option to have a transportation tax last fall, the Minneapolis lodging tax was reduced by 0.5%. And what this would do would take off that overall cap that's been there since 1986 that no one can remember why we have it, that doesn't apply to anyone else, and allow the city of Minneapolis to return to its historical lodging tax level. So this is not intending to go beyond what has historically been authorized by our city council. It would still require a city council effort, but it will allow us to continue to have the funds that we've historically, for years and years and years, since I guess 1986, collected, and that our pledge to repayment of the bonds for the convention center. As you know, our convention center was built to a national scale. When we have the big national conventions, it fills the hotels in Bloomington and Roseville and St. Paul and all over, and we're glad to do that. But we do need to have assurance that we have the revenues to pay for it.
Thank you. Questions? Chair Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Loeffler. And, there was, I think there was kind of, on property taxes, kind of a mixed outlook on this. Representative Loeffler did check in with some of the Property Tax Committee members and had the sense that there was more support maybe than originally thought. I'm really kind of ambivalent on this going forward. I struggle, while I support some of the things that Representative Loeffler had mentioned, I struggle with, again, the high levels of taxation that seem to be happening in some of these communities. But, whatever the will of the group is on this, I'm fine either way. So that's kind of where I'm at on it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Loeffler, you and I spoke, or you came to me to speak on the House floor yesterday just regarding the sales and the lodging tax. But in the sections 1.9 and to 1.13 has to do with the, 3% more sales tax of not more than 3% of groceries and retail of sales of intoxicating liquor and malt beverages. Is that your intent as well, to increase the taxes on those?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative McDonald. No, this is just to allow us to take off this cap that was put in 1986 that has constrained us whenever anyone else, the state, the county, anyone else that overlaps us raises their sales tax.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then maybe Mr. Michael is, or Mr. Weeks, this is just current law, correct? In that sections 1.8 to 1.13?
Mr. Michael.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McDonald, yes, essentially, none of the taxes in Clause 1 and 3 would be unaffected by this. This cap only applies to the lodging tax. So none of these other taxes would be, if you enact this, what it would do is to allow the lodging tax rate in Minneapolis to essentially rise to the level that's permitted here by the language other than the language that's being stricken.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Drazkowski, you and I worked well together here on the floor this afternoon and prevailed. So I'm hoping, as I walked off the floor, I said a Dabney Drazkowski day, and one of your members said you don't get those very often, and I thought, today might be a day that lightning can strike twice. So I'm hoping that you can see clear to supporting Representative Loeffler's amendment today, and then maybe we can be done for the session on agreeing.
Let's hope not. Hope not. Questions on the amendment? Any further discussion? Okay, Representative Loeffler renews her motion for the H4385A7 amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. No. Division? Can I call division? Let's just raise hands if I'm not. For the Loeffler amendment.
Thank you.
With concerns. It does not prevail on a 10-10 vote.
Tie goes to the runner.
I'll talk to you later. Okay. Item next, Chair Marquardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think the next that isn't in the packet would be the A19. A16 is in the packet, I think. So A19 would be the next one. It's not included. And that's a Representative Loeffler.
Okay, I'm sorry, Chair Marquardt, who's moving this one?
Loeffler.
Representative Loeffler, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
Representative Loeffler moves the H4385A19 amendment. To your amendment, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. What this amendment does is it deals with the working family credit, which we have had support for it in the past on a bipartisan basis because it's a really important part of our tax system. And for those of you who don't quite remember about it, 12% of all households in the state receive it. primarily families with children. And it's especially strong in greater Minnesota, where 14% of households in the most recent year I could find data on get it. And in 12 greater Minnesota counties, it's actually 1 in 6 households. And it's based on family income and size. You have to have earned income. So this is only for people who have jobs with earned income. And the amendment before you it increases the number of dependents. Right now, we go up to 2 and more, and to a separate new category that's 3 and more. So the 2 children are in their own category. It lowers eligibility to age 21 and increases the maximum credit that people can receive. And to fund this, I know that's what we always like to know about, it eliminates the corporate tax cuts and reinstates the corporate AMT. And Mr. Chair, I think it's really important for us to think about who is right now struggling in the economy and really needs relief. And I know that the corporations got the 40% rate cut out of the federal tax bill, and we've seen since that passed in December a lot of positive commentary and from the business community about that. This, I think, really balances the bill a bit to make sure that the working families across the state who really rely on this are also included. They're dealing with increased property taxes. They're dealing with increased costs and most things in living. And we thought that it would be good for the working families in Minnesota to step up with a little bit of benefit from one of this really big tax bill.
Thank you very much. To the amendment, discussion for members.
Mr. Chair.
Chair Marquardt.
Thank you very much, Representative Chair Davids. This bill, the working family credit would really help balance this bill out because the tax rate reduction does not get to the first tier. And the working family credit really benefits those families from probably 45,000 household income on down, which do not receive the benefit of the income tax rate cut. And, the Federal Reserve Bank has looked at this program, and it might be the only real program we have that not only reduces unemployment, it lifts children's quality of life, it rewards work and family, and what they have found, it is an incentive to move people from welfare to work. So it kind of does all of those things. It's always been bipartisan. I know we've talked about this program in the past, but as Representative Loeffler mentioned, in the federal tax bill, the benefits that these working families receive in that federal tax bill evaporate very quickly as the years move on. And so this would really be able to capture and provide the benefit that these folks deserve. So ask for a favorable vote on the Loeffler amendment.
Thank you, Chair Marquardt. Chair Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And I would ask members to speak against or to vote against this amendment. And there's a couple of reasons why, but one of them is I think people need to understand that the Minnesota Working Family Credit is based off of the earned income tax credit at the federal level, which is much larger than the current Minnesota Working Family Credit. So you may be under the impression that the dollar amounts that you see in current tax law are the only amounts they get. In fact, with the federal earned income tax credit, already right now under this program, in just federal benefits, people are getting up to $6,300 in the earned income tax credit right now, today. That doesn't include the Minnesota Working Family Credit, nor does it include Representative Loeffler's provision there. So again, we're already talking about $6,300 that is coming from other taxpayers and is being redistributed to those who qualify for this program. And I think that, in conjunction with the existing Minnesota Working Family Credit, is plenty generous. And rather than hitting the taxpayers again, we should be saying thank you to the taxpayers for their generosity. And I would oppose this amendment.
Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to make an assumption that is always dangerous to do, but I'm assuming this is neutral to our bill overall's bottom line. But is there a summary of something? Just briefly tell us where the money is coming from and going to in this bill, because there is an awful lot of additions, subtractions, and so forth.
Chair Marquardt, I think you had mentioned where, or Mr. Williams?
What's,
Mr. Williams to the Petersburg question.
oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, Representative Petersburg, this is based on the governor's working family credit proposal, but it's scaled down a little bit because I think that the savings from removing the corporate AMT repeal and the corporate rate cuts are about $47.3 million. So some preliminary modeling says this provision for fiscal 19 is about 42.6. So it does balance. And it's just removing the AMT repeal and the corporate rate cuts.
Sounds good, Petersburg. Any other discussion? I'll go to the author of the amendment, but I would just respectfully speak in opposition or with concerns about this provision. When this quest was started on December 22nd of 2017, my goal after reading the bill and studying the federal bill, that's what I read, I really wanted to do my best, and I probably could have done a little better, to keep the money that came from corporations to corporations, keep the money from individuals to individuals. I failed in that a bit in that the corporations are basically subsidizing some of the personal income tax rate reductions. And so this puts it out of balance for me, even a little bit further, well, quite a bit further. And I really want to try to hold as many folks harmless as I can, whether it be a business or whether it be an individual. So this, as you know, I've carried the working family credit bills for the governor and for the state of Minnesota in the past and was very happy to do so. But in this bill, you know, this is not a major omnibus bill. This is basically supposed to be a conformity bill. I think it puts it a little out of balance, and so I'd appreciate a no vote on this amendment, very respectfully so. Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know that you have appreciated this in the past. I think that people should really think about the point made also by Representative Marquardt that the first tier, which is where many of these people and their children are in low-wage jobs, are not going to get that second tier tax cut that's in the underlying bill. And so I would I really think that to include them in the benefits of this big bill, this would be a good step forward, and I'd respectfully ask for a roll call vote.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? The committee legislative assistant will take the roll.
Representative Davids?
No.
Representative McDonald?
No.
Representative Marquardt?
Yes.
Representative Anderson?
No.
Representative Applebaum? Representative Carlson?
Yes.
Representative Christensen?
No.
Representative Davney?
Yes.
Representative Detmer?
No.
Representative Drazkowski?
No.
Representative Erickson?
No.
Representative Garofalo?
No.
Representative Gruenhagen?
No.
Representative Hertaus?
No.
Representative Knobloch? Representative Kosnick?
No.
Representative Lesh?
Aye.
Representative Loeffler?
Yes.
Representative Loon?
No.
Representative Metza?
I really feel like the alphabet went a long way to get to M. Yes.
Representative Petersburg?
No.
Representative Schultz?
Yes.
Representative Slocum? And Representative Wills?
No.
There being 7 ayes and 14 nays, the measure is not adopted. The amendment is not adopted. Item next, Chair Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer the A9 amendment.
And whose amendment is this?
That is
Well,
mine,
okay.
Mr. Chair.
Chair Marquardt moves the H385A9 amendment. To your amendment, Chair Marquardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. What this amendment does is increases local government aid by $30.5 million, which is basically the request of, this would bring it back it would bring the LGA amounts back to 564 million, which was the certified amount in 2002 before reductions, and it's never come back to that. And so Representative Paul Anderson had a bill that would do that. And then it also increases county program aid by 16 million and township aid by 800,000. The money comes from basically the same as Representative Loeffler's, which would be the eliminating the reduction in the corporate tax rate and the AMT for corporations. And so, members, this is not a new item for anyone, and we've talked about it, had a really great discussion in Chair Druskowski's committee, but we know that this program is the lifeblood for a lot of cities around the state, especially in rural Minnesota. And if you look at the data on this, you will, if cities did not, especially these smaller cities with smaller tax bases, did not have this local government aid, they would need to raise property taxes, if that's the only way they made it up, by up to 2 or 3 times in some cases, or really slash their budgets when it comes to public safety. And we know that without local government aid, property taxes would be higher and our services wouldn't be as good. That's very clear. And when you look at the budgets, and is that in a lot of these cities, it comprises a huge percent of the budget. And you might question, you know, why is that, so forth, but it basically has to do to even off tax bases. And it's so that if I live in Dilworth or wherever, I should be able to get the same level of public safety at roughly the same cost as someone in a wealthier city somewhere else in the state. So, members, I would ask for your support, and I, Mr. Chair, would like to ask for a roll call.
Roll call having been requested, discussion to the A9 amendment. And again, I would just make the same respectful arguments that this does take the bill out of balance for what some of us are trying to accomplish, not everybody. Chair Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and very fortuitous trade-off there. Since corporate tax relief is a priority on the other side of the aisle, I would remind members that local government aid, county program aid is property tax relief for the business community. It helps assure that they have access to the services that they need, whether it's roads or police or fire or water, the basic, public infrastructure that they require along with the residents of the city, but it does so in a way that is structured to help provide property tax relief at the same time. So, Mr. Chair, you've brought up on this amendment and on previous amendments the desire to keep things balanced between the corporate taxpayer and the individual taxpayer. This is property tax relief for corporate Minnesota. For the small businesses who were up here previously, this is important, and I've never heard the big businesses complain about a property tax cut. This is a property tax cut. So, Representative Marquardt, thank you, and I would urge members to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dabney. Further discussion? If not, the Committee Legislative Assistant will take the roll.
Representative Davids?
No.
Representative McDonald?
No.
Representative Marquardt?
Yes.
Representative Anderson?
No.
Representative Applebaum? Representative Carlson?
Aye.
Representative Christensen?
No.
Representative Dabney?
You're yes.
Yeah, I'm a yes.
Yeah.
Adamant about that, Mr. Chair.
Representative Detmer?
No.
Representative Drazkowski?
No.
Representative Erickson?
No.
Representative Garofalo?
No.
Representative Gruenhagen? No. Representative Hertaus? No. Representative Knobloch? Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Lesh?
Aye.
Representative Loeffler?
Yes.
Representative Loon?
No.
Representative Metza?
Yes.
Representative Petersburg. No. Representative Schultz.
Yes.
Representative Slocum. And Representative Wills.
No.
There being 7 ayes and 14 nays, the motion does not prevail. I know that Chair Knobloch is here. Is Chair Marquardt, is Representative Slocum here, or is she gone for the day? Because we shouldn't probably be calling her, we'll just
I don't
excuse her.
think she, yeah, excuse.
Let's excuse Representative Slocum unless she comes back. We'll, and
Yeah.
excuse
And
Applebaum. Is
And
that okay?
Applebaum excused.
Okay, and Applebaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Item next.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have an A14 amendment to be offered by Representative Dabney.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the A14 amendment to be before the committee and ask for a roll call, please.
Chair Dabney moves the H4385A14 amendment and asks for a roll call. There will be a roll call to your amendment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, as Mr. Williams has indicated, the bill before us raises taxes on 178,000 Minnesotans. That strikes me as a large number. At the same time, we have a tightening real estate market. As people in this room can testify, the number of houses on the market is down. The cost of those houses has gone up sharply over the last, say, 2 years as the market has come kind of roaring back. We've got some real issues with where the housing is available on the market. And because of the tight housing market, we're seeing sharply increasing housing values, and that means sharply increasing real estate property taxes for too many Minnesotans across the state. The A14 amendment targets that very effectively, our response to that very effectively by increasing the property tax refund, setting the targeting threshold from 12% increase in your property taxes year over year to 10%, because people are seeing sharper spikes in their property taxes. And, you talk to folks who've been in their houses and are seeing these sharp spikes. They're looking for relief. And then increases the maximum refund to $1,200. This is going to help make housing more affordable. It's not about just affordable housing, it's about the affordability of housing to people. It increases the homestead credit refund for those who qualify for the program and responds to that tax increase on 178,000 Minnesotans in a very targeted, strategic, and thoughtful way. It's funded, of course, again, by eliminating the corporate franchise, the changes, to the corporate franchise tax, and reinstates the corporate AMT. I know, few things frustrate people as much as finding out that the local large corporation paid no taxes last year. Minnesotans think that everybody should be chipping in on the pot and that everybody should be carrying their weight. And when corporations get out of that by eliminating the AMT, that goes against the fundamental sense of fairness that Minnesota is known for. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would ask for a yes vote on the A14, please.
Thank you very much. Chair Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd urge members to vote no on this. Mr. Chair, members, we do have the property tax refund program in order. It was corrected in the language, or it was conformed with the efforts we're bringing forward here with the language talked about earlier. And Mr. Chair, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact, and Representative Dabney, you know that this is, what you are doing here is to increase taxes on businesses. That's what your effort to do with this amendment is, and that's what it does. And Chair Davids talked about earlier the fact that his goal was to take the otherwise tax increases from businesses and cut their taxes in a proportionate amount and take the otherwise tax increases in individuals and cut theirs in a proportionate amount. But it wasn't happening that way. Even in his bill, there's money from those tax increases on businesses that are being offered in favor of additional tax cuts on individuals. You do it even more. And we need to be honest about this here. So that's what's going on here, members. The rhetoric doesn't match the actions. But thank you, Mr. Chair. Urge a no vote.
Further discussion? Chair Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just remind members that the GOP tax bill on the federal level gave corporations a 40% permanent tax cut and no permanent tax cut to individuals. So when we're looking at balance, if we can talk about balance, let's talk about a 40% tax cut for corporations, permanent, no permanent tax cut for individuals. And the big banks, the folks who brought us the last recession, got an even larger tax cut out of the federal tax bill. I think looking at the situation in Minnesota with sharply rising property values, with a tax bill that will increase taxes on 178,000 Minnesotans, our opportunity to act is now, and our opportunity to act is on the A14 amendment. I would ask again for a yes vote.
Thank you very much. Further comment? Okay, the committee legislative assistant will take the roll.
Representative Davids?
No.
Representative McDonald?
No.
Representative Marquardt?
Yes.
Representative Anderson?
No.
Representative Carlson?
Yes.
Representative Christensen?
No.
Representative Davney?
Aye.
Representative Detmer? No. Representative Drazkowski? Representative Erickson?
Yes. I mean, no.
Just pulled the Mets almost.
Thought I had one there.
Representative Garofalo? Representative Grunhagen?
No.
Representative Hertaus?
No.
Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Lesh?
Aye.
Representative Loeffler?
Yes.
Representative Loon?
No.
Representative Metza?
Yes.
Representative Petersburg?
No.
Representative Schultz?
Yes.
Representative Wills?
No.
There being 7 ayes and 13 nays, the H 4385 A14 amendment is not adopted. Item next, Chair Marquardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer, Representative Carlson will offer the A21 amendment.
Okay, we'll, Chair
Is it
Carlson
being
would
dis-
like to start explaining it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I'll start explaining it while it's
Thank you.
being distributed. It's a fairly easy one to understand, but Mr. Chairman, I would like a roll call on this one as well.
Roll call, I'm going to request there will be roll call.
And, Mr. Chairman, this would increase the renter's credit. It would increase the maximum credit. And if you recall, it's a sliding scale. So the new maximum would be $3,000 for the lowest income, and then it drops as one's income increases. But we would also increase the income level from $58,000 to $64,000, which is the approximate median income for Minnesota. And so, Mr. Chairman, the main reason that I'm interested in doing this is that, as I'm sure just about everybody is aware, the rental market has been getting tighter, rents have been increasing, and so this would give some modest relief to renters. So I would encourage a yes vote. And by the way, the cost on this one is relatively modest. I'm told by staff that it would be approximately 2.6, excuse me, 2.6 million per year.
Thank you, Chair Carlson. Discussion.
And it comes from the corporate side as well, but it's a very modest amount relative to what's on the table for the corporate side of the tax bill.
Thank you, Chair Carlson. Comments or any discussion on this amendment? Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and not all of the committee members get to sit on the Property Tax Division, but we did spend a hearing reviewing the simulation or the report done by our House Research nonpartisan staff on the difference in tax burden between 17 and 18. By type of property, by geography, and statewide, dramatically, the biggest increases in property taxes is on apartments and rental buildings statewide. In the greater Minnesota, statewide, it's about twice as much as the next category of property. Commercial industrial is only up about 2%. Where statewide, it's about, I think, 12% for apartments. In the metro, it's even higher. It's up about 15.5%. And for those of you who serve on the bonding committee, you know there's a lot of pressure for us to step up with precious bonding dollars to help deal with the affordable housing crisis. This is one way we can contribute to that. Because it is the fastest growing property tax burden in the state. And I think this would go a long ways towards helping us sustain our current affordable housing while we're looking at other solutions.
Thank you very much, Representative Loeffler. Further discussion to the Carlson Amendment? The committee legislative assistant will take the roll.
Representative Davids?
No?
Representative McDonald? No. Representative Marquardt?
Yes.
Representative Anderson? No. Representative Carlson?
Yes.
Representative Christensen?
No.
Representative Dabney?
Aye.
Representative Detmer?
No.
Representative Drazkowski? Representative Erickson?
No.
Representative Garofalo?
No.
Representative Gruenhagen?
No.
Representative Hertaus?
No.
Representative Knobloch?
No.
Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Lesh?
Aye.
Representative Loeffler?
Yes.
Representative Loon?
No.
Representative Metza?
Yes.
Representative Petersburg?
No.
Representative Schultz?
Yes.
Representative Wills?
No.
There being 7 ayes and 14 nays, the H4385A1 amendment, excuse me, the H4385A21 amendment is not adopted. Item next, Metz,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two more on my list.
2 more on your list. Okay.
And
Then
an
we'll go
eight,
to
the,
other list.
Mr. Chair, the A8 amendment, Representative Lesh, going to offer the A8 amendment.
Okay, thank you, Representative Lesh. Representative Lesh moves the H4385A8 amendment to your amendment, Chair Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, it states that for filing the return in 2018 or later, corporations can get their lower corporate franchise tax rate if they certify to the commissioner that they've created jobs, 5%. So I hear a lot of talk about how tax cuts create jobs, but we don't really do much to offer accountability for those job creations. And as many of you are aware, I have questions about that as to whether or not tax cuts actually create jobs. Some of you may have those same questions. But this is just a little piece of mine, a minimal piece of mine to the tune of 5%, that in fact they have created jobs in return for the money we are shifting their way out of the tax pool. So that is my amendment, Mr. Chair, and I would ask for a roll call.
Roll call, hand request. There will be a roll call. A discussion for members. Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's an interesting idea, Representative Lesh. I was wondering with regard to the 5% rule, if you've got 2 or 3 people, how do you measure that? Is that in performance of additional hours available for work, or is it just people?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Hertaus. That's just people. So hence, this is just a minimal. I mean, you could technically hire someone for a few hours a week and satisfy your obligation. It's almost nothing. You could, despite what the intent of this bill would be, cheat the system and say, yeah, I hired a person to put in a few hours a week and do it. So I think it should be
a loophole.
There would be a loophole, Mr. Chair.
But if it's legal, it's not a loophole. Chair Lesh.
You pointed that out before, Mr. Chair, but you are technically accurate. So yeah, I think it should be a pretty easy yes, considering that the threshold that these folks that are getting the taxes out of the pool have to make is pretty low.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, further discussion? Chair Erickson.
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative Lesh, wouldn't this be a violation of data privacy?
Chair Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Reps Erickson. I believe no, Chapter 13 does not apply to these tax-paying businesses.
Chair Erickson.
What's
Further,
that?
Chair Knobloch.
Well, Mr. Chair, I mean, if you think about it, there's all sorts of corporations that have all sorts of different profits. If you had a small company that made $100,000, I mean, 0.5%, they'd get $500 more or less, depending on what happened with Representative Lesh. I don't know how many employees or even parts of employees you're going to be able to hire with $500. To me, I'm not sure that this actually is very workable.
Further discussion? Representative Lesh.
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further discussion, the Committee Legislative Assistant will take the roll.
Representative Davids?
Nope.
Representative McDonald?
Nope.
Representative Marquardt?
Yes.
Representative Anderson? No. Representative Carlson?
Aye.
Representative Christensen?
No.
Representative Davney?
Aye.
Representative Detmer?
No.
Representative Drazkowski? Representative Erickson?
No.
Representative Garofalo?
No.
Representative Gruenhagen?
No.
Representative Hertaus?
No.
Representative Knobloch?
No.
Representative Koznick?
No.
Representative Lesh?
Aye.
Representative Loeffler?
Yes.
Representative Loon?
No.
Representative Metza?
Yes.
Representative Petersburg?
No.
Representative Schultz?
Yes.
Representative Wills?
No.
There being 7 ayes and 14 nays, the H 4385A8 amendment is not adopted. Item next, Chair Marquardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the final one I have on my list is the A17 amendment being offered by Representative Davney.
Chair Dabney moves the H 4385A17 amendment. Two-year amendment, Chair Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, the chair has a policy here today that no amendments can be offered that were not offered as bills. And I appreciate that, but there's a provision in the division report that was never offered as a bill, never heard in the committee until the division report, and that is reneging on the state's commitment to Minneapolis regarding its library aid for the downtown central Hennepin County Library. Members may not fully appreciate, especially those not from Hennepin County, what a unique statewide resource the Hennepin County Library is. Central Library downtown on Nicollet Mall. It houses the only patent and trademark resource center for innovators in the state. You come up with, that better mousetrap, you better make sure that somebody else didn't come up with that same mousetrap idea before. Hennepin County is Central Library, the library in question here, is the only place in the state that you can do that sort of research, that has the sort of resources that you need to do that research, and has the trained expert staff to assist you in researching your innovative idea and then navigating the patenting and trademarking as a small business person. Importantly, this was a commitment made to the city of Minneapolis and its taxpayers in 2013, that they would receive some relief from the construction, partial relief from the cost of the construction of the downtown library. The commitment was made by the state to the people of Minneapolis in 2013, and the first aid payment was made in 2016. These aid payments are now factored into the city's 5-year financial plan for financial stability, and the proposal in the division report now incorporated into the chair's amendment. The repeal begins this year, during this budget year already, and would cost the city $16.48 million over the next 4 years. As I said, this is a commitment that the state has made. It's a commitment that is of concern to me, and I know that the chair wants to get this bill across the line to the governor's signature. I can see that in any number of ways. and I hate to bring up, possibly sensitive things, Mr. Chair, but you may recall House File 4, Chapter 66 from 2017, which the governor vetoed. And
I've got the list.
I would imagine you do. During the Palenti era, I used to, keep the veto letters. They're probably still in a file somewhere. But you'll recall in that veto letter from 2017 of Governor Dayton's, he specifically pointed out as one of the factors involved in his decision to veto that bill. I keep using that word, I'm sorry. To act as he did on that bill, that repealing 477A.085 and reneging on the state's commitment to the taxpayers of Minneapolis was one of his reasons for acting as he did. And I certainly would not want him to act that same way on the final product here, because I think, Mr. Chair, I want to join with you in getting a bill to the governor that he's willing to sign.
And I appreciate that, and I will accept that offer of help. As far as reneging, it's not really reneging, it's just changing the law on that. And as far as any amendments, I did say very clearly, I hope that members can offer any amendments they'd like. I did make the comment to be helpful if maybe they've been heard in committee. But I also did follow up saying, because I thought, well, you have an election certificate just like everybody else around, most people around this table. And you can certainly offer amendments at any time. So, discussion to the A17 amendment. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Or Chair.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chair, the point, just to clarify, that I was trying to make earlier is the provision in the division report is the item that was never heard in committee before the division report was unveiled. It was
17. Just kidding.
Nicely done. Mr. Chair, I think I've made my concerns clear, and I would not dream of speaking for the governor, but I think the review of his past behavior on this issue was hopefully helpful. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll withdraw the amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
And as members know, this is a process. We go through several steps here. So thank you, Chair Dabney. Chair Marquardt. Okay, I'm just going to go, I just pulled these out and go in order here. I believe Metza has an A1 amendment. Representative Metza moves the H4385A1 amendment. Am I correct on that? That's yours?
Yes.
Correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And so, members, essentially what this amendment does, we add a, as you can see, very small change that need to get made to make sure that this met the standards set forth and wouldn't jeopardize anything. We currently have a lease where a trail is, and we cannot renew the lease without this language change. And so, being that this is a committee that does good government all the time, if we adopt this amendment today, we actually will see a savings moving forward. And so I worked with the department on this, and the language isn't acceptable to their specs that they had raised concerns about before.
Questions for members on the A1 amendment? Representative Metza moves the H4385A1 amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Thank you, Representative Metza. Item next. I have the H4385A16 amendment. I believe that's a Schultz amendment. A16. Now, some of these I'm kind of guessing, so help me out if I'm not right here.
That's correct, Chair.
Two-year amendment for Representative Schultz.
So this is for property in Duluth, the Human Development Center. They focus on providing mental health services. They've acquired a property and missed the deadline because they acquired it after the deadline for filing a waiver for property tax. Their nonprofit, St. Louis County, has brought this forward as they feel the property meets the requirements for not paying property tax. So I would consider this a technical amendment and hope that we can support it.
Okay, thank you, Representative Schultz. Chair Drazkowski, any thoughts on this one?
Mr. Chair, there seem to be some concerns about making the already complicated property tax system even more complicated by adding yet another carve-out. And as a matter of fact, I think a good number of the members on the committee wanted to go the other direction and remove the special exemptions that are in law for the ones that are in Minneapolis. So that didn't happen and was not brought forward as a proposal, but certainly I think that was the sentiment of probably the majority of the committee.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Schultz?
that was a different bill. That was for assisted living facility. This is for the Human Development Center. This was never heard in committee.
Representative Schultz, is there a cost to this?
No, not to the state. This is just local property tax.
Chair Drazkowski, thoughts?
I'm still reading the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let's temporarily lay this one over and come back to it, and let's give this a good look, if you would, Chair Drazkowski. I will move the H4385A15 amendment. This amendment puts out by 3 years when I believe that the sales tax for Melrose, this came to me from Chairman Paul Anderson. We went ahead and extended some things for Melrose after they'd had their fire and a lot of their downtown to burn down. We missed the sales tax portion. So what this does is this extends the sales tax portion for the time that they would have to be able to use those funds. Questions for members? Chair Marquardt.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. We've heard that bill, and I'm aware of the Melrose situation too, so I would ask for support of that amendment.
Thank you, Chair Marquardt. Questions for members? I'll renew my motion that we vote in the affirmative on H4385A15. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. Item next. Representative Schultz moves H4385A4 amendment.
I'm not going to offer that amendment.
Okay, we'll pull that one. Item next is the H4385A6 amendment. Detmer, to your amendment, sir. To the A6 amendment. Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think most of the people on the committee knows that I've been working on this area for our homestead disabled veterans, our homestead exclusion program that we have for our veterans. And I've been working closely with the various Commanders Task Force. There's 9 Commanders Task Force groups that are chartered by the federal government, and also with the counties. I've been working closely with them. Basically what this does, it changes the date from July 1 to December 15th, depending on eliminating the difficulty of current law where the veterans or survival spouses becomes eligible, and would also provide possible have where they would have to wait for 18 months to get the benefit. It allows property transfers for non-eligible owners to return to the tax rolls. So once when that property owner leaves that property, it goes back to the tax rolls. Allows a one-time transfer of this benefit for a new property that equals a lesser value for the surviving spouse. We have some surviving spouses that are in large homes after the veteran spouse passes away, and they would like to downsize into something smaller, as long as it's equal or less value. So it puts the other property back on the tax rolls. What this amendment does not do, it does not increase the tax shift to the counties or through allowing properties to be returned to the tax roll. Sooner likely will have a positive effect for the counties. And it does not increase the administrative burden of the counties. And it does not expand the eligibility or length of the benefit. So this has been supported by the counties, and it's just some language we had to get cleaned up for our veterans and the surviving spouses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Detmer. Questions to Chair Detmer on the A6 amendment? With that, Chair Detmer renews his motion on the H4385A6 amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you, Chair Detmer. Let's go to another Chair Detmer, A18, if we could pass that out, please.
I got it.
Chair Detmer, if you could, Chair Detmer was the H438518 amendment. If you could please discuss the amendment. We will not vote on it until everyone has a copy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you recall, last year, Representative Howell passed some legislation last year for allowing counties to share information with county assessors. And what this will do, the amendment will allow the data sharing between the county and the veteran service officers and county assessors. In response to that bill, last year there were some problems getting that language through so that the counties could share that information. And I talked to Representative Scott. I've got her approval from her committee. It passed through my committee, and it requiring so the forms that they have, that they can get them through in a timely manner so that they can get the benefits to the veterans. Thank you.
Discussion to the Detmer A18 amendment. Chair Detmer renews his motion on the H4385 A18 amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Thank you, Chair Detmer. Item next, Representative Metsa moves the H385A2 amendment. Two-year amendment, Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is an amendment that was heard in committee last year in a bill and was included in your tax bill. It essentially ties a base year of 1983 and ties it to inflation so that our communities can get an incremental increase as the production taxes shift for the local distribution we do through the state here, which is handled by the Department of Revenue. And this is supported by the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools, Representative Lehman Lewick and Senator Eichhorn as well, to help all of our communities out who are still struggling with the bell curve that we have when production taxes take a dip. So it's much needed dollars going out, just shifting them around. There is zero cost to the general fund, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Metsa. Any discussion? I would recommend a yes vote on this. So any other discussion? Chair Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Metsa, I just want to make sure, so every community is on board with this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Range Association of Municipalities and Schools communities that are members of that are all in support, as is the Range delegation in terms of it. I don't know if every single community within there is on board. I'd imagine they would be, as it gives them, every single community within this formula, an increase.
Chair Anderson. As you know, the city of Crescent had some concerns about this. But Representative Metsa moves the H4385 at Preston's force. They're behind you 100%.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion prevails. Okay, item next, Metsa moves H4385A3. Two-year amendment, sir.
I'll withdraw that one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that the H4385A3 amendment has been withdrawn. Item next, Representative Metsa moves the H4139B2 amendment. Two-year amendment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this was just a bill that we caught that was referred to this committee on the 9th of April. It was supported, I believe, unanimously in the Jobs Committee. But if it needs a home and taxes, I just wanted to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to get it here as well. Essentially, we have a property tax account that over the course of every 4 to 5 years has some excess dollars in there, and rather than letting them sit for many, many years, we would like to give control of those dollars to the agency to give out for public works grants so that we can use those funds in place of the dip that we saw during the last recession in the production for taconite. This is also all agreed upon by all the stakeholders within the Range delegation. The second section of the bill is in regard to some small changes we made in the TEDF fund, which is an incentive for our mining companies to reinvest in the properties up in northeastern Minnesota by providing them up to 25 cents per ton in a rebate, and the companies are also comfortable with this language after working it out.
Chair Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Metza, is this the same language that we passed in the jobs bill last Friday?
Representative Metza.
Mr. Chair, Chair Garofalo, yes, and that's why I actually didn't have it switched to the 41, from the 4139, which is your bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the
Chair
committee,
Garofalo.
so when this provision came up, sometimes these members in the Iron Range, I don't know what star chamber they go into to negotiate their bills or compromise. We consulted Representative Lehman, and she was okay with this and said it was fine, so we included this, and it's currently in the jobs report, if this is the same language. I have to tell you that I did not dig into this. I had other stuff going on, but just for members to be aware, I mean, that provision is in the Jobs Committee, and we're not sending that bill to the Tax Committee. So it would probably, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to your judgment, but I think it's okay to leave it in there now, and we can do further research on this. But it'd probably be a bad idea to take this out right now for a couple of reasons, one of them being procedural. And my apologies, I did not realize this was the identical language until like about 30 seconds ago. So, but I'm going to defer to your judgment, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
I would ask Representative Metza to just withdraw this at this time because I want to talk to the mining companies, but it sounds like we got a deal here. They're awfully close. But I don't really want to put it in unless, I'd like to talk to you further if that's okay.
That's
On this
fine,
one.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, that we will talk more about this if.
I'll withdraw the amendment for further action at a later time.
Representative Metza withdraws the H4139DE2 amendment. And Representative Metza, thank you for that. Possibly in Ways and Means, if we can get this worked out tomorrow or on the floor, we'll work on this. Thank you, Representative Metza. Item next, if we could pass out the H4385A25 amendment, it's Drazkowski to, if you could please explain your amendment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a technical amendment provided by House Research, and it relates to Representative Whalen's provision in the bill that collapses the residential property tax classifications. One of the things that she does related to blind and disabled is that she makes that a state credit instead of, in order to make it work. And this provides that an individual is not going to both get a veteran's credit and a blind and disabled credit when that happens. So it was something that wasn't foreseen, and it just makes sure that one individual isn't getting paid both credits at the same time.
Discussion on the 825 amendment for members.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Chair Detmer.
Will the veteran have a choice?
Representative Drazkowski. Chair Drazkowski.
I don't know if Mr. Hines is here, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hines, could you join us here? Chair Detmer has a question. Chair Detmer, could you please repeat the question?
My question was if the veterans would have a choice of which benefit that they would get.
Mr. Hines.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Detmer, the benefit under the disabled veteran program would be of much greater magnitude, and I can't imagine that they would want to, that there'd be any choice in the matter. They would take that.
Chair Detmer.
Thank you. Obviously the veteran does have that choice then.
Further discussion? Chair Drazkowski moves the H4385A25 amendment. All fair say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion fails. Thank you, Chair Drazkowski. Item last, until we get to the bill as amended, to the A16 amendment, Representative Schultz. Okay. I guess I have two more amendments. On the Schultz amendment, have we figured anything out there? Chair Drazkowski, any thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, after looking it over, it looks to be very prescriptive, telling the local county what they have to do. And I would expect there's probably opposition to that amendment.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to bring the county lobbyist down, John Ungaro, and then maybe Steve Hines to explain the bill.
I can sure do that. And Mr. Hines? Now, we haven't taken testimony on many of these. I don't think it was really necessary. This one, I'm trying to figure this one out. Please state your name and who you represent for the record, please, sir.
Mr. Chair and members, John Ungaro, Government Relations Director for St. Louis County.
Welcome, committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thoughts on the A16 amendment?
Mr. Chair and members, St. Louis County had brought this language to the representative because it is something which was just a timing issue, that this Human Development Center is a nonprofit mental health provider in Duluth. They purchased this building and they missed by 3 days when the timing of the purchase came in, 3 days from being able to actually have the property continue to be considered exempt because they are an exempt, property tax exempt organization themselves. So our assessor has already for next year exempted this property from property taxes for pay 19. This was simply for a 1-year situation. Again, they missed by 3 days. It's a $17,000 hit on this facility. Otherwise, they have to pay the property taxes. And St. Louis County and the assessor strongly support this legislation or this amendment.
Chair Anderson, then Drazkowski. Chair Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And have you reached out to the school district then? And what is their comment on the?
Mr. Ungaro.
Mr. Chair and Representative Anderson, we have not reached out to the school district. We have reached out to the city, and the city has strongly supports this also.
Chair Anderson.
Mr. Chair and Representative Schultz, have you heard from the school district whether they support this?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Human Development Center provides vital mental health services, and they're really struggling now with low reimbursement rates for the services they provide. So I would think it's in the best interest for the city, the school districts, and the county for them to continue to operate, and this will help them continue to operate and provide vital services for our community.
Chair Anderson.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Schultz. So we don't know a definitive answer from the school district on this then?
Representative Schultz.
I have received no opposition from the school district on this bill.
Chair Anderson. Representative Drazkowski, then Detmer. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ungaro, why didn't the county do this on their own? They have the authority in law to provide abatements.
Mr. Ungaro.
Mr. Chair and Representative Drazkowski, our assessor certainly was looking at doing an abatement, but the assessor felt that because of July 1st deadline was the cutoff date in that year, and this was purchased on July 3rd, he felt that a legislative basically endorsement of that would give him a higher comfort level rather than going through the abatement process himself and making that decision. He just felt that since the law says July 1st is the cutoff, he was much more comfortable having the legislature endorse this so that he could move forward with that. Again, setting a precedent. He didn't want to do something unless, the legislature actually endorsed doing this. He could have, yes, on his own done that, but he felt uncomfortable since it missed by 3 days. Didn't want to set a precedent. He wanted the legislature to actually endorse this, so he had a higher comfort level of doing that.
Mr. Hines, could the county assessor just do this? I don't send them to jail or anything.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the county could do this on their own, yes. And as I understand it, it's exactly as Mr. Ungaro stated. It was July 1st is the cutoff in law. This sale transaction occurred right after July 1st. Therefore, it was legally by law on the rolls, so taxes were spread against it for pay 18, and now the only possibility is to do an abatement, which could be done by the county, but could also be done by you.
Well, somebody's going to set a precedence here. I just assumed it was the assessor. Chair Drazkowski.
So, Mr. Chair, so Mr. Hines, so July 3rd, which is 2 days after the deadline that apparently is in law, that gives them the authority to do the abatement, can they do it without us acting legally in law?
Mr. Hines?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Drazkowski, the July 1st deadline in law isn't about abatements, but if an exempt entity purchases the property before July 1, they just go through the regular process, apply to the assessor that they're an exempt entity. The assessor takes their property off the tax rolls for the upcoming payable year. Well, the problem is they missed that deadline, or this transaction didn't occur in time for that, and it became a taxable property for pay 18, and once it's taxable, then the only option is for somebody to abate those taxes, you or the county.
So, Mr. Chair,
Drazkowski.
so I mean, when there's fires in communities and other things like that, cities and counties can do abatements in law, and they do them. But Mr. Angaro, why, I mean, because it's not an emergency maybe, or something like that, that your staff is reluctant to do so?
Mr. Ongaro?
Mr. Chair and Representative Drazkowski, I can probably sum it up best by saying that we have a real honest assessor.
Well, I support the bill then, Mr. Chair, if he's honest.
Well, Mr. Ongaro, I'm sure he is honest, and but he can be honest and still do it. Mr. Ongaro?
Mr. Chair, I just think he was afraid that this could create a slippery slope, and what if it was 5 days after? What if it was 7 days after? I think he just wanted to make it clear this was kind of a one-time deal, put it in law, and so his comfort level then would go up considerably.
I think I'd rather have St. Louis County on a slippery slope than the state of Minnesota. Just a thought. Chair Drazkowski?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I don't know what to do here, but I'm fine either way.
You're fine either way?
Yeah.
Chair Detmer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the testifier. What group is purchasing this facility?
Mr. Ongaro?
Mr. Chair and Representative Detmer, it's the Human Development Center in Duluth. They are a longstanding mental health facility, and they had purchased this additional property to expand their operations.
Do they, Mr.
Chair
Chair,
Detmer?
do they use the term "the Hill" or?
Mr. Ongaro?
Mr. Chair and Representative Detmer, they are currently have a existing facility in Duluth. This is an additional building that they had purchased.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Detmer? Okay, Representative, I'm going to support this. Let's just do that. Representative Schultz moves the H4385A16 amendment. Any further discussion? Representative Hertaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is why in real estate contracts, time is of the essence. My question was, it calls out an abatement, but it doesn't call out what the dollar amount is. Do you have any idea of what kind of money we're talking about?
Mr. Ongaro?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Representative Hertaus, it would be $17,000 for A18.
Representative Hertaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the county has the authority to abate, but does the city and the school district?
Mr. Ongaro, good question.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hines, maybe? Mr. Hines?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hertaus, my understanding is that the county could abate for the entire tax.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Representative Hertaus?
One thing I should point out, too, is that there
Mr. Hines.
is some state general tax involved here, too. I assume it's commercial industrial, so that they would also be involved.
Representative Hertaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I presume that, too, that it was commercial property. And so based on the percentages of what CI does, just, for purposes of discussion, approximately $6,000 of that amount is attributable to state general levy. This is the type of burden that all small entities are struggling with each day with regard to the state general levy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does this put us out of balance? Because because
No, Chair Davids, we wouldn't have taxed the property because it's a nonprofit, so it would be neutral.
Good point. Okay, with that, further discussion on the on the amendment H16. Representative Schultz moves the H4385H16 amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. Thank you, Representative
Thank you,
Schultz.
members.
I believe item last before we wrap her up, Chair Drazkowski moves the H4385A26 amendment. Two-year amendment, Chair Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the items that isn't in the bill before us that was in the property tax article was one dealing with house garage and an acre, dealing with school construction levy, property tax reform. That was taken out, and instead we've come to agreement. Representative Loon and Marquardt and I crafted this amendment, which will bring forward a working group in the interim to report back to the legislature next year in January. So this is the amendment, and will give us a place to work forward from and bring more understanding about what is a very complicated effort to bring reform to our property tax system.
Discussion, Chair Marquardt.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Representative Drazkowski, for bringing this forward and for your great leadership on this issue. And thank you to Chair Loon and Chair Davids for kind of working this out, because we really do have an unfair situation when it comes to our school building bonds and equalization and property tax law that is unfair to farmers. I think it's very unfair to rural Minnesota students, and I think this is a good step to really look at this, bring all sorts of folks together and I think come up with a good plan. So I would ask for the committee's support, and thank you, Chair Truskowski, for your work on this.
Further discussion? Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if this working group finds that this is a very good thing, I would recommend we classify all property ag.
Oh, boy.
What could possibly go wrong with that? Okay. I would just like to take a moment on this issue, too, to thank Chair Loon, Chair Drazkowski, and Representative Marquardt. Representative Marquardt, you and Chair Drazkowski have put a lot of time into this issue, and I'm hoping this working group can come through with some issues that we could enact in law, because I agree with your comments wholeheartedly. But I think a lot of thanks needs to go to you, Chair Marquardt, and Chair Drazkowski. With that, let's see, Chair Drazkowski moves the H4385A26 amendment. Further discussion?
Mr.
Chair. Chair Carlson.
Yeah, just kind of curious. I'm aware of two caucuses in the legislature. This is enacted the day after final approval. But on line 1.17, one of the members of the group shall come from the largest minority party. Rather interesting language.
That would be the RFL. Just kidding. We can't say that anymore, can we?
You can say it.
Chair Carlson. I get sued all the time, whatever.
I could see that with a pending election and nobody knowing what the outcome might be. But I think currently we have two political parties in the legislature. There are times when we have had a representative or two in the legislature from a third party, or however you want to refer to additional parties. One time we even had an independent, I think. But I just point that out, that it's rather interesting language. We usually say majority and minority party, but I'm not going to propose an amendment.
Chair Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Carlson, the language was taken from the original language, that language anyway, that formed out the property tax working group. So back then, maybe they saw that there could be more than one minority party. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Largest minority party. When I was in the minority, I was always the largest. But with that being said, any further discussion? Okay, Chair Drazkowski moves the H4385A26 amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Thank you for everyone that worked on that. I don't have any other amendments. Are there any other amendments? To the bill, Chair Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for nonpartisan staff. I'm just, on the spreadsheet on line 46, is that the right revenue note on that? I don't remember it being that much. This is the charitable deduction not allowed for amounts paid for college athletic event seating rates. It's 2 million?
Mr.
Okay,
Michael?
all right. Wow, okay.
And that's only for, goes to scholarships on that one.
Yep, so just
Chair Garofalo.
Yep, thank you. So to the bill, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to congratulate you for doing an exceptionally good job on this, in fact, a great job on this bill. 94% of tax returns are going to experience a tax reduction or no change at all. That's over 2.5 million filers, and you did an outstanding job with that. Also, I do want to thank the commissioner and the department as well. For those of us that speak legislature, you can kind of see when a deal's going to be coming together and one that's not. And the news on this looks, pretty good. Mr. Chairman, I'm glad that you were able to come to an agreement. The governor's proposal and yours both use the adjusted gross income on the federal side. In addition, the dependent deduction at $41.50. Those are huge changes. And also, you have, whether people on the other side of the aisle realize it or not, you have made a good faith first effort to reach across the table to work with the other side of the aisle on this bill. And I just want to highlight a couple of those things for people to realize that while we always want to fight for the best deal, we don't want to push too hard here or things could fall apart. And what you've already done, Mr. Chairman, is you've put $56 million of deemed repatriation dollars for this biennium and $68 million of the next biennium on the table. And that's not an easy task for our caucus to be putting out there. Because of your leadership, you reached out to the Dayton administration and you've included that in the bill. In addition, with the inclusion of the, when you look at the overall tax burden on this bill in terms of when we do conformity, there's revenue raisers, then rate reductions. There is a slight burden where we're shifting the tax burden from businesses and corporations onto families. And that's a tough pill for some people to swallow, myself included. But we recognize that in order to get something done this session, you have to proactively compromise here a little bit. And so I want to thank you for your leadership. I know that those are not the sorts of easy things that a lot of people want to do, but you stepped up to the plate and you've put us in a really good position to make sure that conformity happens. This is one of these things that it really does transcend politics. And I know, again, we want to fight for the best deal. Everyone wants that for what they believe in. But you've made some significant concessions on the front side, and I hope that this is a solid first step, and that the administration recognizes the work that you've already put in. So, and on behalf of everyone in our caucus and the House Representatives, thanks for great work on this bill.
Well, thank you so much, Chair Garofalo. To the bill, as amended. Representative Marquardt.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to say thank you for your courtesy to our members. I don't know if there was a bill that we wanted heard that you did not hear this year, and I know that was the way last year also, so I really want to thank you for that. And I agree with many of Representative Garofalo's comments. I think the bill that is offered here moves us closer to getting a tax bill this year, which is crucial. And Chair Davids, I know your formula has always been 68, 34, and 1. And I really believe this bill is in the realm to be able to do just that. And so, my only concerns have to do with the relationship to the federal tax bill. When the federal tax bill came out, I don't think anyone will argue this, the priority and the emphasis there was for corporations. They have a 40% rate cut, and I think that's going to benefit the economy. So that's it, but it is what it is. And for working families and senior citizens, what happens when you look at kind of the long range on it is that there's initial benefits there, but then they begin to evaporate over not that long a time. I mean, if you look at the Joint Committee on Taxation, if you're 30,000 or income or less by 2021, you're actually seeing a net tax increase. And by 2025, those making 40,000 or less see a tax increase, and 75,000 or less by 2027 are seeing tax increases. And what they see is temporary as far as the tax benefits. And, I'm hoping the federal government will extend it at some time, but we don't know. So when you look at what's happening with the federal bill, it's corporations one and working family and senior citizens nothing. And so I think the state bill has to kind of balance that. And I don't know if we've done that enough in this bill, Mr. Chair. When you look at, and I know there's limited dollars, but the rate decrease of the second tier at 7.05 ultimately to 6. Is it 7.5 or 7.0? 7.5, the ultimate it gets down to. But you know, if you're under $37,000 in that first tier, which a lot of our beginning families are, you're not going to see any benefit at all on that tax rate decrease. And the only benefit you'll see kind of in the individual part here is the $1,000 increase on standard deduction, which would be about $53. And so even when that maxes out, let's say you've got somebody at 50,000, you know, when you max that out, it's about, if you include all the benefits, about $116 if you take the rate decrease and the increase in deduction, $116. And, you know, in comparison to the governor's plan for those folks, you know, even two of the credits, two people, that's 120. And if you have two kids, that's $240 of a credit, almost doubling that right now. And that's not including if you have the working family credit, which is an average increase of about $160 per family, roughly probably under 40,000 in the governor's plan. And so I think we've got to go a lot further in trying to even the score for working families and senior citizens who, you know, are feeling the squeeze right now. You know, you look at housing prices are going up, tuition's doubled in the last 10 years. You pay $1,000 a month for daycare for each kid. Things are being squeezed, and when working families talk about this at the kitchen table, those are the issues. And so every dollar we can target and focus and gear towards those working families and senior citizens, I think not only benefits them, but helps even the score with kind of what this federal government is doing to a lot of working families, especially in the long run. Kind of the other areas is some of the deductions, Mr. Chair. I would ask that you look at some of these deductions that I know Mr. Cummings was looking at. And, you know, the non-reimbursed jobs by the employer or moving expenses and so forth. When you take all those, it looks like the average person is being nickeled and dimed to death on this. And so I think we've got to go back and look at that area. And finally, the last point I think we need to take a look at is kind of there's still some increases into the future. I know the phase-ins kind of hit in 2021, that last and final year, and there's still an uptick on some of those. And there's also some one-time funding, especially with the deemed repatriation, some of the other things that ongoing funding might be related to or attached to that's going to cause problems in the long run. And there's also some of the business conformity items. I know the couple I said earlier that start out, they raise a little bit over time, then by 2027, they're actually coming down. And I know that's way out of our forecast and way out of our tails, but it could have some real repercussions in the future as we kind of look at that. So, you know, I just think a better balance here would make it a much stronger bill. But I've got to say, again, Mr. Chair, that I was encouraged by what I saw, and I do appreciate your work. And I and the DFL want to be part of making sure we get a tax bill, because if we get a tax bill that adjusts to the federal conformity and do it just right, we're going to have a tax bill that's going to benefit a lot of people in the state. And, you know, the last thing I want is that big, irresponsible federal government raising taxes on Minnesota families or senior citizens. We don't want that to happen. And so I'm encouraged. I think we're not that far apart to getting a bill that can become law. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Chair Markwart. Further discussion on the bill? Well, and before we do vote on it, I'd like to make a few comments too. I can't believe that we're at this point already in the session that we are having our last meeting unless, again, like I said, I'm going to continue to work on the Duluth issue. So there, we could be calling you back, but we'll see where that goes. That's going to take some decisions from leadership in the House, Senate, and the governor's himself, or the governor's office, I should say. So I do want to go through a few thank yous here. I'd be remiss if I didn't. And in the bill, we probably will hear it a little bit later this year, is the bill that Joel Michael, Steve Hines, Sean Williams, Pat Dalton, Chris Clayman, Jared Swanson, Cynthia Teflin, and Kathleen Schill cannot ever retire. We thank you so much for your service. And I think we have to call out a couple House Research folks. They're all good, they're all special, but Joel Michael and Steve Hines, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough without them, but we have good people that are coming up through the ranks. But thank you so much, Joel, for your service. Mr. Hines, thank you. Then I'd like to thank our partisan staff, Committee Legislative Assistant, Mr. Tim Smith, Mr. Travis Reese, somewhere. Oh, thank you, Travis. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Andrew, for writing up. I don't know how you read all that stuff. But you folks put a lot of work in, all of you, and I appreciate that. Chair, all the members of the committee, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a joy to be able to work with each and every one of the members of the Tax Committee. Special thank you to Chair Draskowski, Vice Chair McDonald, and Chair Marquardt. You're awesome. Thank you. Appreciate your work. And, you know, I really enjoy working with the department. The department with Commissioner Bowerly, Mr. Cummings, Leslie Thompson. Their testimony today, a couple of things. We'll work them. And last but surely not least, our committee page. How about a round for Mitch? These folks do a tremendous amount of work. So I will renew my motion that we refer House. That's just Rubus. You didn't put you on the list.
Mr. Chair?
Savage.
Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair McDonald, do you think Rubus?
I will thank Rubus first, because without him, you wouldn't be here. So, Mr. Rubus, thank you very much. No, in all sincerity, though, a great thanks to our chair, Davids, who truly is a great chair, very fair. He's a fair chair with great humor and sincerity and wisdom and knowledge. It really is one of the best committees that we all can be a part of. Trust me, after being on HHS for 8 years, the tax chair is wonderful, and he does a great job, and look forward to it. So on behalf, as just a small little vice chair, we all say thank you to the big chair, Mr. Chair Davids. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rubus got me on this one. Thank you, Stephen. You do a great job. Really appreciate it. And I was almost going to say good government all the time, we're adjourned, but we should probably pass the bill first. I will renew my motion, House File H4385, as amended, be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion prevails. Anything else for the good of the order? Representative Metza.
Mr. Chair, I know we've talked about the Essentia bill a few times, and I was just wondering if we could agree to settle on the name since it's going up to leadership of the Don't Think Twice It's All Right bill.
Ain't my fault. Thank you so much, members. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for everyone that has put this bill together. Good government all the time. We are adjourned.